All right, guys, welcome to another Great Pages. Really excited about today's conversation. We got Linz with us. And so we are well into a couple episodes in here to season two. I don't know how many we got under our belt now. This might be like four or something like that. But Hugh,
Who
why don't
knows?
you kind of lead us in here to some conversation and we'll get going.
I kind of feel like it'd be great someday if we got Cheryl. I don't think Cheryl would ever do this though.
We could get her. Yeah, we
We'll
Who
could.
could
try.
get Cheryl? You can't swear though when Lindsay's here.
Well, it's more trying to get Cheryl not to swear.
Right.
We
But I
could
think
balance
she'd
each
also,
other
I
out.
think Lynn's would also, anyway, well. We've said it a few times, but the second season of what are we called? Great Pages.
Brave pages.
Brave Pages. We are gonna focus a little bit more on family issues, so we're gonna get a little bit of that today, but we're gonna have some other episodes specifically for, marriage, family, kids in this type of ecosystem. But today we want to talk about work. I don't think we've specifically, John, maybe we have, but just the idea of the physical work of building a brave city. I was likened back last night to thinking about some scripture about the idea of work, but I first thought about the whole issue in Genesis where everybody's apparently, or at least Adam and Eve, are working in the garden, and from what we can tell, they're loving it. It's paradise. There's no issue related to work. It's purposeful. It's deeply connected to relationship with God, and then sin mucks it up. And so what comes out of that is that it's going to be really hard for women to nurture life into the world. And then specifically, it says that there's going to be now a toil element related to our work. So it's a part of the natural, like the struggle of like, we just don't want to work. It's natural. We'd rather not work. That's actually a result of sin. So when people start thinking about, well, how do you redeem the curse of sin now that Jesus paid the price for all that? I've always said the way that you change the curse of work is that you do it with a purpose for the kingdom. The kingdom gives you a reason to get up in the morning and to labor harder. I saw some other weird video meme the other day, and a guy was going, like, the one thing that changed his thought pattern was, instead of saying like, I gotta go to work or I gotta do this or whatever, he just said, he just changed the word I get to go to work. And honestly, that's a key part of kingdom work, because it's just as hard, and in spiritual ways, it's heavier work. And that's why I think most of the church doesn't want to do this type of work.
Yeah.
Because,
Well, that's
it's a heavy work of prayer. It's like there's a toll to kingdom work. Like technically nobody should want to, but because of Jesus, we actually can go, no, we get to do this work. So I just want to kind of talk about that today.
Yeah, I mean, the concept that maybe we can spend this whole hour zooming in on is how can the curse be broken? And particularly, like we're talking about work, and Hugh and I and John actually, quick plug, has another great podcast that he hosts called The Work Ethic.
I didn't know, like, you're moonlighting on us, bro.
I've actually been failing to publish episodes for over a year because of you guys on that project. But
that's a good podcast. I think
I've
one
had
of the
that going
best
for
was the
years,
one that
and,
you
and
and
have
I
a few
did.
more interviews lined up here soon.
Yeah, but so I want to hear your quick thoughts. This can just be a 4-part intro, but what makes work so terrible is the idea that we're working so hard only to then get old and die, and our work mean little to nothing.
Yeah.
Even if your idea of work is like, I'm going to have kids and pass my blessing and my inheritance on, still, when it's all said and done, it ends with you. If that's true, that is truly a cursed life or a cursed effort. So there's this faith element, this almost, what, last episode, John and I talked about the necessity of seeing into the eternal on some level, or at least into the spiritual. For me, it was into the eternal, even more so, of when the work of our hands is building up something that actually might be eternal, the curse starts to be reversed. One other thing, John, and then I'm gonna pass the ball to you or Linz, or maybe actually I want you to talk, and then you can kind of see what Linz thinks about all this, because for those that don't know, this is actually my wife. So
Yeah,
we've
okay.
been,
I was like, I'm gonna interrupt
Yeah.
here very shortly for this more introduction.
right,
For
and you
those
can
who
do
do
that.
not know,
That's your
yeah.
job. You can introduce her, but we've been in this work together for 20 plus years, and we have 5 children, and that's big for us because we see all of our work kind of flowing into now their paradigm, their worldview, where they want to live, how they want to use their hands, sports they want to play, friends they want to have. But still, for me, that's not enough. Like I have to have some sort of an eternal perspective in order for this curse of work to be reversed. I feel like that's what the curse was the work of your hands is going to seem meaningless.
It's a perspective shift. Like,
Yeah.
that's and if you can get somebody over the mindset shift, you might be able to get somebody that's a hard worker. But like we've battled since the day we started this. I know when you guys started your ecosystem, it's the same thing. It's like there's a black and white difference between the true workers and the ones you got to try to get to work.
Yeah.
And we experience it in our ecosystem, people that we employ, but we've had some of what I call our missionary leaders, people that started this with us. It was the same issue. Like the trouble we got in was over work ethic and perspective on work. So it's not just like what you're dealing with your millennial non-believers that might be connected to your ecosystem. I think it's ingrained even in the training for ministry. Oftentimes it's a very, what we would call soft training. It's Bible studies and maybe hanging out with a few friends, but when you get into the actual physical labor of building out businesses and working with people, you just find people just don't want to do that work. So, John, give us a little, since you've been doing this podcast apparently on this entire topic, what comes to, just to kind of set a framework in your mind, what's the biggest issues we got to talk about?
All right, I will do that, but before I do that, I would like to ask Lindsey to weigh in, and just not to basically maybe introduce yourself to everyone. I mean, there is an assumption a lot of folks connected with this crew will know you, but also there's going to be people listening who don't have context other than Taylor's told some stories. And so I want you to kind of make an introduction, and then maybe in your own like intro kind of story, like if you want to use this thematically to like tell that would be great. But I'd like to actually have you chime in a little bit here, and I'll remember the question.
Good luck, babe.
To come back to.
Yeah, I'm Lindsey. I'm really glad to be here. Yeah, I love these guys a lot. Taylor's wife.
Love him more. Probably.
Yeah, we have different
Probably like
connection.
me more than him at times, I bet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it works.
Yeah,
I'm
totally.
thankful for both of these guys for sure. They've been a huge part of my life. Obviously, Taylor has, and you too, John. I think there's the element of the body of Christ in you guys that's really powerful that keeps me going a lot. And even these podcasts have been very encouraging. So yeah, I'd love to hear more about thoughts of work. Work is very important to me and to our family. I think just the very nature of how Jesus is embodied and how he you know, is not here with us physically and left us, and now we are actually his hands and his feet, is what comes to my mind a lot. Like, so working is actually like, it's almost like we are him, you know, and he is working through us. And, you know, when I hug someone, it is the very love of Jesus that I'm conveying, because he can't hug us, you know, like he's not here. And so I think it's a very powerful thing to be able to work for him, and perspective of what are we doing, purpose, why are we here, and how does that coincide with what are we supposed to do while we're here, and how do we work? So
Can I throw in just a little something on Taylor and Lindsey, like as a couple, because like I often tell people, like when I describe the quality of like our people, I'll oftentimes start with them because sometimes I'll say like they're kind of like specifically refer to Lindsey. I'll say Lindsey's like the closest thing to like our Mother Teresa as far as like a spirit. Taylor gets dragged along in that, but Taylor, I would always say, has been the hardest worker in our ecosystem. And then together, like you guys are fixing up a fourth story in one of your houses because we're trying to, you know, make it easier for some really key leaders in our network to have a place for their family to live. And so you guys are renovating this space. And Lindsey's always right next to Taylor, like in the actual physical manual labor. And we're all we all fix up houses. None of us really know what we're doing, but we do just kind of get after it. But Lindsey and Taylor are always together in the physical work when they're adding on backyard for all the neighborhood kids, like they're both out there together. When it's even a counseling need or a spiritual need, they like tend to do it together. So I think it's unique. Usually it's on one side of the spousal equation that the guy works more or the woman works more, but in a kingdom ecosystem, like you can't actually do kingdom ecosystem and just like in the old church way, the pastor goes to work and the wife does whatever, or vice versa. This is like in a Brave City ideology, everybody's got to work. And, you know, Cheryl, I was joking with them today. Cheryl started this, you know, equine therapy, and it led to us having to build 120 by 70.
Yeah, you pretty
But-
much work for Cheryl now.
Pretty much, yeah. And it's, you know, it's like everything that you go, okay, we got to do that to help people. It does tend to require actual labor. So, you know, this was a pretty expensive, it's a covered riding arena so that people can do therapy sessions and not have the sun beating down. But it was a heavy cost financially, but we had to go work on it. So we had an old guy named Russell that's the contractor, and he said, if you'll help me work, we'll take that off the cost. And I was like, totally. So we just got the final bill where he showed me how much he paid me for my labor. And I was close to 10 full-time days, and I think he gave me $1,000 off the cost. But it was me and my son-in-law,
$4.50 an hour.
and Cheryl was out dragging hoses out to the job site and anything she could do. And she has some physical, you know, medical issues that make it hard for her to work physically, but she was, anytime she could be out there working with us, she was out there, and all for about $1,000 combined. But I go, that's just, it seems like that's the case for all of us, like the physical labor that we do. If you figured out the hourly wage of it in building kingdom ecosystem, it might be like $1.50.
Well,
Well,
this
this
is
is-
to be a part of getting
Yeah,
the job done.
but yeah.
And
So this
that's
is the whole
mindset.
thing, John,
Yeah.
like, this is, and man, oh. It's so hard to navigate this because there's so many emotions involved when you've been doing it for so long. The amount of nights that this woman has sat and heard my groaning and complaining, grumbling because Hugh's not doing as much as I think he should, or John's not doing as much as I think he should, or I'm not doing, or she's not. Like, there's so many things involved in an ecosystem. If it was just me, then I could just look at me. I think of it like the sport of tennis or the sport of basketball. With tennis, you just go in, or golf, and it's just you. It's you and the ball, and you focus and you go, I have to do this, and that's it. But there's no way around it. With basketball, it's so dependent on the team, everyone being committed. When I think I've talked about this before on the podcast, but what Kobe was notorious for was if he had a teammate that he didn't think was committed to the level, or at least in theory to the level that he was committed, Kobe would do everything to get him off the team.
Right.
He would berate him, stuff I'm not a fan of, to be honest with you, but I understand his strategy. He would berate him. He would talk trash. He would guard him every practice because he wanted this guy off the team, because he knew there's no way, if 4 of us are in and you're not, then we're
Navy
screwed.
SEAL. We want you to ring the bell. Get out of here if you don't want to.
So that's problem one, is we're talking about a work. Like, I even think about Paul and Barnabas, what really divided them? And I think it was that Paul was so frustrated at this other guy that he wasn't pulling his weight.
Yeah.
And Barnabas was like, hey, hold on now. He's new to this, or he's young, or he's getting there. And I don't know who was right. What I know is both of their perspectives were valuable. Paul was like, we can't do this if this joker is not pulling weight. So as an ecosystem, what's so important to us in this idea of do the work is that you understand the curse that's in all of us. So I gotta own my own crap. The curse is, I better see something for what I'm doing. The curse is the innate need for quick results, for outcomes that we can visualize and see and experience. The curse is
yes, I want to see something. I also want to get paid the
Well,
appropriate
yeah.
amount
Yep.
of whatever they think.
what
Prove
we
value.
determine is a fair wage.
Mhm.
So whatever we determine, whatever culture tells us is a fair wage, we better get that for, I just put 28 hours in, I just put 10 full-time days in, I got 1,000, do the math, I'm making $4 an hour. That's not fair. And it's like, well, okay. So then what about your children? That's a parallel. You as a mother have a child, carry that child for 9 months. How much do you make an hour? Usually none.
Negative.
You make none. You have the child. You stay up all night for 2-3 months, nursing the child, being with the child. How much are you making during that time? The reason you're able to put that work in with generally such selflessness is because the kingdom paradigm has broken the curse of your work, and you don't hold those standards anymore. So what Hugh's saying is, like, I can't have this lady at home who's like, go do your work and I'll do mine. And then, you can, but man, that's gonna be tough.
And you can't have obviously the same. I wanted you wrote a little page for some folks, back in the day, and you sent it to me, and it was about I forget how you said it, but it was about the expectations inside a community. Talk about that a little bit, because I'm like Taylor too. Like, if I'm exhausted, I tend to judge everybody else for not helping. But one of the things, John, we do need to talk about is the work that you do as an apostolic head, like being like a mom and dad. You're like the apostolic head of the family. So you do work way more than the kids, obviously. And what we're experiencing, like even this last week, you guys have been working on that thing. I'd be working on this thing and try to jam a couple hours in to help you guys because there were certain skills I had you guys couldn't find anywhere. So when you're an apostolic head, you do tend to try to help everybody else a little bit too. And you were asking me, hey, you need any help up there? And I'm thinking, you don't have any time to help me. But that's a classic apostolic. It's not so much a pressure, but you just always feel like you want to help everybody, whatever they need, but you're also working for yourself. The kids that we might have working at the coffee shop or the kids we have in our house or whatever, they're not apostolically oriented. So we have to understand they're not going to feel the weight of adding. Like I would say, like, and I want to get to this, like, what's a reasonable amount of hours you should actually be laboring for God and for people later on. But I think for apostolic leaders, it's way more than the average rank and file.
I do want to say, and then talk about the great exchange thing that you wrote,
Yep,
but
that's right.
I do want to say, here is the importance though. Judgment has to be off the table on some level, or at least like,
Curtailed.
yeah. Well, like unholy judgment, like what's the word I'm looking for? Like counting someone's sins, like holding it in a bucket,
record
that
of
kind of
wrongs.
judgment.
Mhm.
I think there is a place for some sort of judgment, like, hey, bro, but
Accountability, yeah.
the apostolic fervor it's important to recognize, but it's also important to recognize that Ephesians 4 says that as apostolic leaders, our role is to equip others to carry apostolic fervor. So, and I know no one here is saying this, but no one is exempt
So
from
it should
this.
be a challenge in the community all the
Always.
time. Totally.
Yeah.
That's like me saying, hey, Hugh, don't ever worry about being shepherding.
Yeah.
Because you're apostolic.
Right.
So just be a dick all the time and don't care about people's needs because you're apostolic. And that's not, no, we need to be equipped and molded. And so when someone goes, hey, I don't have the same capacity as John, I think that's a cop out. I'm saying, well, then you need to be around John more.
Yeah.
And you need to let some of that like dust get on you so that you see, oh man, this dude is actually working harder than anybody I know, but he doesn't seem to be getting the results that would motivate you to keep working. So go ahead.
Great exchange us a little bit. What was that
Yeah.
little paper like? Even what prompted you to write that?
Well, I was inspired / frustrated with a guy in our community who, I don't know, I feel like the Lord just kind of spurred this on. I don't necessarily like 1-for-1 exchanges. Like you work
Like
for
you help
4
me, yeah.
hours, I'm gonna give you this amount of money because then I'm putting the value on you. Like I think your time is worth $20 an hour. So either that's good or bad, you're like, you know, instead of really like when we can see the whole vision. And I think you two as apostolic leaders, and you too, John, like you see the vision, you see the whole city, you know, like in Tampa, how does this decision affect the poor, the middle class? What are we doing here? And then you make a decision accordingly, you know. And it's almost like when we're working on this project, our boys who are, I would say, moderate, we're teaching them to be hard workers. We have 14-year-old, 13-year-old, and they are learning how to do this, but they're thinking, how many boards do we have to carry up to the attic? You know, and I'm like, that's not a good question. It doesn't.
Terrible question.
The question is
How long do you need me?
We have to get this thing ready. So if I started counting how many boards I've carried, how many hours I've worked, I'm gonna start to get really discouraged. Or even as a mother, like if you were to monetize those things, it would be way worse for me. Even if I made, you know, a certain amount of money.
Like if I walk out to the farm to help you lay some posts, and the first thing I say to you is, hey, how long do you need me here? I know immediately you want me gone.
Yeah.
You're like, oh,
No, we're good.
No
I don't need to do
minutes.
that.
I want
Yeah.
you gone instantly. There was a guy this week that wanted to help, and I'm paying this guy. But he was like, I can come help for a couple hours, you know, and I'm paying him well, 25 an hour, just to come help hold some boards up. And he walks in to this project that we're doing for this family. And he walks in and he goes, "Hey, I don't have a ton of time. How long do you need me?" And I said, "I actually don't need you at all." Like, that was my immediate response. I was like, I said, "I got it.
We do need you.
You're good.
Yeah.
Like, head on home." And he was like, "No, I can help for a couple hours." And I was like, "I don't need you for 1 hour." Like, that's that kind of position for me. And it wasn't an innocent request. That's the thing, is anybody listening could go, why is it not good for someone to ask that? After you've been working for a long time, you'll understand why. Like, that's not the right question.
Yeah.
The right question is, let's go, let's get it. And when you need to go, go.
Yeah, you can leave.
So, sorry.
Yeah.
So in the
Keep
great exchange,
Good.
you're just saying like to have the, like, I put in 8 hours, so I need, what's the alternative then? What were you pushing for in that thought?
Yeah, just to teach people to see the whole picture of like, I'm exchanging, and in this case that I was thinking about, it was a situation where, we're mentoring somebody, we're having them at our table 3 nights a week to eat dinner, they're involved, we're dropping everything when they need counsel or anything in their life. And then, and then they have this particular skill that we're like, "Hey, could you help with this?" Not even like for us, like for someone else, and then they were like, "Well, that's going to be, very pricey." So I'm just thinking about like, wait, you're expecting something on one end, and then the other ends, like you're like, "Oh no, my time is value." It's almost like to say, well, the time you invested in
So
me
the
was
core of what she wrote was this: everything we give unto the Lord.
Yes.
We do not give to John in hopes that John returns to us.
Mhm.
Everything we give to John, we're giving to the one that we follow.
So we believe in what he's doing. Yeah.
Everything we give to the poor, we give to the one that we follow. We never consider, like, what's my return on investment for what I'm giving to you? The exchange is that we have some kind of almost like insane, larger than life faith, a faith that really does make us seem delusional, that what Jesus said is true, that he actually promises what you're doing has an eternal consequence.
And nothing we ever do, he says, is in vain. That's 1 Corinthians 15. But don't get weary in the work. So we know that there is some payoff, like for everything. Apparently every second there's some payoff. But to me, that's the great mental change in kingdom work, is you cannot do the work for the people. You cannot do it for the product. You have to just literally do it for the man.
That's the curse.
The man is how you
Yeah.
change Huh. Hard to do though, in the moment. John, you ever run into young people that ain't working for the man?
That ain't working for the man.
Yeah, that literally like the idea that everything you do is as unto the Lord. That was actually, by the way, the scripture that formed what we call the Protestant work ethic, that came out of the Puritan movement, that everything you're doing with your kids out in the field from sun up to sundown is as unto the Lord. That's why we built this nation so darn fast, is you had a bunch of believers that went, when our barn still isn't done, but we're doing a barn raising for the McCalls, we're all in, we add extra hours because everything we're doing. So like literally, if you can get people to work for the Lord, you actually get a lot
Synergy.
more work done than if you're trying to work for the paycheck or whatever.
That passage, I think that's in Colossians. It's like whatever you do, work at it with all of your heart as working for the Lord. And like that heart, that what we translate heart is the same word we translate soul, like life or breath. It's psyche. It's like your psyche. That's where we get, it's the same word, psyche. It's like to work with all your soul, with all your, and I actually think like on this topic, what's really important to distinguish between is, like, even as we're talking, it's very hard for us to separate out returns on investment, economic returns, wages, getting paid. We have so coupled the concept of work with employment culturally that it's very hard for us to break them apart. I think motherhood's a great example of one that isn't a wage earning work, that is a tremendously valuable work and contribution to family, neighborhood, society, whatever. And it's a good illustration of that, because as you were referencing these, like the garden story, like, and we know from experience, like hard work is a gift, like the actual doing hard things, and like the feeling you get when, I mean, even like, I know for me, it was always tiling floors is like a great, like, I like doing tile. It's hard work, but then I like love like the, like, get when you're done, like look at it, to be exhausted, to be like, I did that. And then even the gift that is the like rest that grows out of hard work like that. Go ahead.
You
What?
want to make a quick trip to Alton?
You got some tile to install?
I need some tile work right away.
Hey, I want to act like what we hear a lot, and like practical. People will be listening to this, maybe husbands and wives, maybe teams. We always get asked, like, well, like, where's the balance? Like, how many hours should somebody actually be working in a week? America created the 40-hour work week. Prior to Industrial Revolution, work was sun up till dark. My guess is that agrarian lifestyle of like we work the land probably for most of the thousands of years we've been around has been from as soon as we can see to when we can't see anymore. But the world that we live in right now, we're, people are trying to grow churches or build businesses or whatever, but the mindset is like, I think right now, like from what I can tell, even from our team, people that we hire, I think they think a full-time work week is about 25 to 30 hours from what I can tell.
Well, a lot of it has to do with expectations, though. I was talking to a friend this week, and we were actually working together for a minute. And he said something that just caught me. He said, like, I have to learn how to do what I do more efficiently. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? I said, I think what you're doing is beautiful. He's doing really great stuff in our city particularly for men and women coming out of recovery, and for men and women living on the streets. And he said, well, I'm broke. And I would roll my eyes and I was like, bro, you're not broke. Like, I actually think, and this is for us too, I think it's dishonoring to say stuff like that. I said, when's the last time you missed a meal when you were hungry? And he said, well, I never have. And then he said, but I can't. He said, I want to travel more. I want to go to, Italy and South America.
Always go to Italy.
Yeah, he said, I want to, I want a new vehicle. And so he's naming things that don't sound overly selfish at all. They sound great, things I would love too. But the expectation of, I need a lot of what Babylon tells me is good in this moment now, then fuels what we think is a reasonable output of work.
Yeah.
Like, I got to put this one, if I can get my hours to 30 a week off on the weekends, making somewhere between 80 and 150 an hour.
And get maybe 4 to 8 weeks of paid vacation.
4 to 8 weeks of paid vacation.
Yeah.
Then I can travel more. I can, do the things that I want to do. I can buy the cars that I want to buy. I think, John, this is the curse. I think Eden, the concept of Eden was, you don't have to worry. Like, you're good. You're going to be provided for what you need. I think the curse was, now you have to worry all the time.
Yeah.
You have to wonder, how are you going to get to where you need to get? So what do you think?
So much. So there's so many thoughts.
Thanks so much on this.
Let me back up. Let me back up to this like reference you made to the sun up, sundown kind of agrarian lifestyle, and then like where we're at today, because I think there's some interesting history there. Like, so when you think about that kind of pre-industrial life that many lived, it was a very integrated life. Like people were learning at home, working together as a family, like lived in little towns. They governed very locally. They educated out of the homes. They like they were, everything was together.
Yeah.
And what ends up happening with, there's like an overlap as we move toward industrialization. It's the exact time we move toward urbanization, because what happens is like, because like on the land, it's like your tools are, the land and tools are like the capital, and then you go work really hard, and that's labor, and it's all kind of like together in that. And it's subsistence farming. It's super hard, but like it's also rich. Like there's many of us that can hear about that and go, man, that's sounds really great. But what would happen is people started to go, man, like there's, because now you have capital setting up stuff with industrialization in these urban cores, and people would go, man, like you can get paid for your time there, and we could go work. And like actually there's like products then, like I want a radio, and like just as an example, but like there's a quality of life increase and a decrease of costs as we start moving, and everyone floods into the cities and away from this kind of agrarian subsistence living, and starts exchanging their time for money so that they could, and they start moving from like creators to consumers then. And we separated labor and capital like substantially, right? And so then we had to put some stuff in place, because we actually like we siloed all of the, now you go to school, go to church, go to work, these are all separate things that you engage in, rather than some holistic form of existence where you're learning and growing and building and doing. And because we did that and we separated these things out, which I think like in some sense sin like breaks like relationships, it pulls these things into like their own place. So then we get in these situations where now we're working around the clock for someone else who's exploiting us. And so laws have to come into place to go, we're going to have the 40-hour, we're going to put in place like restrictions on child labor, on work hours, on these kind of things. But like, now pause that for a second, and just like, there's the reality that we've inherited. But now if you're an artist, if you're a painter, let's just say, and you're painting a picture, first of all, and maybe you have other things that you do that do this, but it like, you ever like you become completely enraptured in the work that you're doing at leisure, really, because you're like, this is just growing out of me. I want to do it. And you lose track of time completely, and you're so in it. Now, I used to paint a lot when I lived at my mom and dad's house. I painted in the garage like all the time. And my mom might come out and say, I might have started as soon as I woke up on a Saturday or something. She comes out and says, hey, it's time for dinner. And I'm like, one, I can't believe it's been the entire day. Like, I feel like I just got out here because I'm so enraptured in the process of creation itself. I don't feel like I'm working, but I'm working really hard. But also, if you came to me and said, you can only do this 40 hours a week, you need to balance this work with the rest of your life, that would be an appalling correction to the one who's, for the love of the doing, is putting in meaningful work and creation and building something, contributing something. And I think like holding those next to each other is a really good way to like contrast what it is that we're talking about, because then in that lens, we realize work is something more akin to worship, is something more akin to co-creating, building, contributing,
as the
flowing out
Benedictine
of
said,
us.
it's the prayer, like the work is the prayer, right?
Right.
You pray without ceasing, so you work without ceasing. And that was the mentorship,
And I believe then that I think that doing that, so like when I was painting, for instance, it was as an amateur, right? And I don't mean I wasn't good, but I mean, I wasn't like painting so I could sell it. I remember being at the mall, they used to sell all these Thomas Kincaid things, and there would be these people who would hired, and I was like, oh, I would never do that job. You get hired as a painter to like put blotches on the prints so that they're like originals, like mock-ups of originals, so they have paint texture. like a paint by numbers kind of thing. But like if I was painting for a product to sell at a farmer's market and I was turning that thing into something for the economic return, it actually would be a bit of a bastardization of that endeavor, as opposed to, so rather than it's about the results or the product or the expectation of what will come because of this work, it's actually more like, and I think something more like a process that we participate in, or an embodiment of a value or a state of being. It's like, this is just what we do and where we are. And what I wanted to, you talked about the apostolic prophetic leader's role. I wrote this down as you guys were talking before about others not working hard. And I think this is why it's important. I think it's important that we're not in the game of convincing anybody of anything, like selling and expecting you to care or to work hard or to be like, you should be about kingdom ecosystems. Like, do you, like, you could like leave. It's fine. It's actually fine. I know it can sound cold, but like, I think the role of the leader is, one, to embody the dance. Like, it's almost like a bard sings the song, or a DJ plays the music. It's like, embody the work. And then also, like, I don't know, while we're not convincing, it's like people will come. Builders will, like, you can sniff out each other. And I've heard people say in our community, I don't know if this is a good thing, but they say it's like trying to get on a moving train. Like it's kind of hard here. Like, y'all just keep going, and it's not like built around the new guy, or like, it's not like the 101 class, or like we're not recruiting. And it's like, kind of like I had to run and jump in at risk of peril. That may be a bit of a criticism, but it's also like, I think it's it makes me think of Fight Club. Like, you have to wait on the front porch for 3 days without food or encouragement. Then you can enter and begin your training. Like, you got to want it. And actually, like, if I'm trying to sell you into wanting it, well, then I'm going to be selling you forever. Like, rather than you're compelled by the Spirit of God, by the call of God, by something born in your heart. And that to me is where I go, pray that, what is the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. So ask God to send laborers, but I don't know that we should be running around going, you should labor either.
Yeah.
That's all great. That's all great stuff.
Especially if we believe it's a reward, right? Like, if it's working to the Lord, if it is a joy, if it is an honor to be able to work, number one, to like have the mind or the hand, the body physically to work, and then to be able to do it, if we really see it as an honor and a joy, and we believe that it's producing something. So it kind of tests what do we believe? Then,
Well, and then that we get to is actually true, not just a linguistic game we play with ourselves, but it's like, no, we get to participate in the co-creation of the coming of the kingdom of God. That's an incredible reality that I feel like unbelievably consumed by. And then like, oh, by the way, hard work's good for you. And then also, like, rest and leisure. And for me, community is actually born in ways that I don't know it in any place other than shoulder to shoulder work, which, like, that's actually like a byproduct gift to me that is substantial.
So let me keep pushing, because I think, like, now I feel like we got some handholds. Like, when these leaders are going, okay, how do I get people to want to work hard? What we're saying is, you can't badger people into working hard. You can't really even belittle them. That doesn't do any good. But you have to talk about why you work hard. You have to talk about the dream, the art, why you're doing this. If they're a young entrepreneur and they want to start a business or something, and they go, well, how much do you think I should work? We go, well, what's your dream? Like, what do you want to see happen with that business? And I guess work till you got the dream. If the dream's not showing up, then you just got to keep. So what we would say is, like, don't coach to having a balanced life. Nobody's going to have a balanced life.
There's no such thing.
Coach to the dream. If they're not inspired by a new dream and a different thing that they want to do, or then you can't give people inspiration. Like, but I to me, it gives me now a new way to talk to people about, well, why we have our work ethic is because we have a picture of what we want to see happen in this town.
Well, and another thing is, you got to stop complaining. You can't, even as a joke, as a tongue-in-cheek kind of moment, you can't paint the work as defeating or as
Yeah.
incredibly lonely or oh, I gotta go do one more day in this thing. Like, if we actually believe what we're talking about,
Yep.
there is, and I don't think it's lame, man. I don't think it's cheesy or over spiritualized. There's an actual joy in what you get to do. How you communicate that joy is contextual to personality, to the moment, to the day you're experiencing. But I would say that I'm convicted personally of not conveying to others how much I actually love working, how much I actually love putting my hands into something that I know is going to produce a pathway to like some sense of liberty for someone,
Yeah.
at least the option of liberty. What John said, and maybe Lindsey, you have some more thoughts on this, but doing it with other people is so great. I think when something is so great, not having it can be the inverse of that. It can be so hard. Like, man, it's not that I don't want to work. It's I so much want to work with other people.
Yeah. Let's, can you read the passage from Paul
Mhm.
when he's talking about his passion for why he was working? What is that out of again?
I don't even know where it is. I think it's Acts. Yeah. So it's when Paul is kind of, I feel like this is his little, foundational treatise for authentic church planting. He says, he says, I have not coveted anyone's silver or gold or clothing. So I would bookend like his journey with these two ideas. So the silver or gold or clothing goes all the way back to the Luke 10 stuff with Jesus saying, don't take any money bags with you. Is before you go on this being sent out, go into architect kingdom ecosystem kind of stuff, you have to understand that I'm going to provide what you need. But that provision does not come through, magical requests. It comes primarily through working with your hands, which Paul said, live a peaceful and quiet life,
Work with your hands.
work with your hands.
This is God's will. Yeah.
And then the second thing he says, he says, I've not coveted anyone's silver or gold or clothing, which I think is a very convicting and direct passage or thought for any missional leader, church planting minded, community development type person. Is you sit around and you covet this
Don't
guy's
look
grant.
around. Don't look around at all.
Yeah.
You wish you had this donor, or you're upset that this guy's chilling on the beach, and it's like, Paul, either he's lying, or this is important for us to understand. He said, I don't covet anyone's. And the second thing he says is, that my hands supplied mine and my companions' needs, and that it is by hard work that we must help the weak.
Boom.
And so he was so forthright in saying, like, I got it. I'm good. Like, I'm going to work with my hands, and through that work, I'm going to provide mine and my companions' needs, and we're going to be able to help the weak. And that's when we now can herald. This is why we're doing this. The curse has been broken in us.
Yeah,
The
great.
curse of what holds you to that thought you were given, John, of industrial, like, oh, I'm going to go work for this factory, or I'm going to go get this job. What is all that? To me, everything you were saying is summed up in the idea of security.
Yep.
But it's a false sense of security. You think you're secure in this thing, this promise that Empire has given you, but you're not secure in that. That's not even real security. Security is found in faithfulness to the one who provides everything.
Yeah, and I have a thought too. I think, he tells us like, seek first his kingdom and then everything else will be added. And I think there is a focus on the mission, the whole thing that he knows we need, or we will not make it. Because if we focus on ourselves, our needs, am I being paid adequately? You know, is it a return? Like, is what I'm giving also what I'm getting, or at least half, you know, like I'll give more, but I need to be returned some. All of that is thinking about yourself. And I think there's a mission, there's something that he has left us here to do, that when it is done, he's coming back. So if we're about the mission, and I think he gives us these little small missions, finish the barn, it's a mission, like, or, you know, like finish this. And when you know that, you're like, it doesn't matter how long we work, the whole thing is we're getting the arena built, we're getting that built, and then we'll move on to our next mission. And when the work is in him, when you're one with him, when you're actually like working for him, with him, then the work is joy. The work is, you can leave the rest to him. But I think he knew, like, if you start looking inward and looking around, coveting other people's gold, it's going to ruin you, and you're going to become bitter,
They get to charge.
jealous.
That ministry group, man, they're charging like $8,000 a day for those guys to
Right.
come on in
It
and
just
The
doesn't.
lowest,
it doesn't
the
read well.
lowest I've been with any passion that I have, music, leadership, communication, thought leadership, the lowest points I've come to is when people start telling me how much money I could make from
Yes.
this art.
It's hard.
Once that thought enters into my bloodstream, it puts me in a place of such like entrapment
Mhm.
to, oh, well,
Yeah.
if that's not a curse, I don't know what a curse is.
Yeah, I'll never forget this one moment we had. We took care of an older man for a long time, Milton, who we've probably talked about a lot on here, but overall, he was just a joy. Like, he was a gift to us. We worked a lot taking care of him. It was a lot of work, but ultimately, I think he was a gift and a treasure. He's like changed our lives. Our kids are different because of him and because of our relationship with him. And but I never forget this one day, our neighbor, who was one of his best friends, came to me, and he was like really excited to meet with me. And he was like, hey, you know, you can get paid for taking care of him. And like, he was talking about like signing up as a home healthcare nurse, because I was already doing that, you know. And I just had this thought, and it kind of just felt bad to me. And I was like, I don't want to get paid for taking care of him. Like, that's a joy that would take away something that was a gift to me, you know. And you know, but it was a consideration. Like, I mean, I want to use money wisely. Like, should I? Then my kid could get braces, maybe, if I did get paid for it, you know. But then I'm like, no, I don't. There's this moment, there's this exchange, and like, what's worth the exchange?
Yeah, you're giving up something to get that done.
Yes.
But had the neighbor come and said, and we talked about this, so I know the answer to this. Had the neighbor come and said, hey, I want you guys to know that I saw what you were doing, and I went and got a grant, and next week in your mail, you should be getting $1,000 check, and it's going to come every week. That would have been great.
Yeah.
We would have been like,
I'm not afraid.
praise the Lord.
Accept money. Yeah.
So there's such a small like window, or this really narrow road of somebody comes and says, hey man, your music has just blessed us so much. I don't know why, but here's a mill.
Yeah.
I'd be like, great, thanks.
Yeah.
But that's so different than somebody going, you need to charge more for this.
Yeah.
This is good. You need to charge more money.
So
Go ahead,
double click
John.
on this, because I think this is an important distinction, which I'm going to call like, because what I hear you talking about, because in the case that someone comes and just blesses you because they want to, you are freely offering gift and you can openly receive gift. But the exchange piece of it is the conversion of gift to exchange. So like, where you're operating in the realm of love and gift, it's the exiting of gift economy into transactional economy. Does that sound right with
It
the
does.
difference of what you're saying?
Yeah, and again, this is 3 more podcasts just
Mhm.
on this concept.
Yeah.
Because we know that there are. So my 13-year-old came to me at the beginning of this year and he said, I want to start getting up early and going to the gym. And so we have kind of access to this basketball gym and this fitness place that's in it. So 4 mornings a week, we get up at 5:45 and we go in and we just do little things. We do plyometrics, he shoots, we do, kind of mostly just like body weight type stuff, but we go to the gym together. And it's always so wonderful. Like we went this morning and afterwards we just sat on the tailgate for a minute while we were cooling down. And if someone said, hey, here's a grant for you because I see what's going on with your son and it's really awesome. Here's a grant for some equipment. You can refinish the floor. Maybe if you want to get new goals, whatever. Here's 10 grand. But then if I said, hey, buddy, his name's Levi. If I said, hey, Levi, I've been thinking this through and man, what I'm doing is actually worth about $125 a session. So I'm going to need you to start paying me for my time. The unthinkableness of that would shake any child. Like it's not even a concept. And I'm not saying people shouldn't charge for their time. I'm saying that's the paradigm I want people looking through is you love this. It's you're giving of yourself. Always figure out how to make money for what you're doing. But also you hold it so loosely because you love it so much. The way for that thing to become a curse is to start thinking that you are entitled to more money, more recognition, more results, more. Navigating those two, what seems to be a little bit of a dichotomy, navigating that's really tricky. I think it requires some kind of like wise counselor, some kind of like Holy Spirit guidance, because I don't think you can do it as a definitive idea.
And you can't, clearly, nobody can just, like, even in your art illustration, you can't just do art all day long. That doesn't make, like, you have to earn a living wage, right? So we all are stuck in that. But like,
right.
listening to this conversation, what I would say is when you're building a kingdom ecosystem, you just work sun up to sundown, no matter what, because you love doing it. But you might have to, like, Taylor and I both get asked, Lindsey gets asked for coaching. And what that does, that we have to now come out of our art for a moment to help somebody else, learn how to begin to do art.
That's right.
So we might charge because we're being pulled out of our
I actually
love.
think that's a good way to honor the work that you're actually engaged in. Where it's like, if I have to walk away from this, I probably need to pay someone to keep it up while I'm busy doing this other thing, or like acknowledging the cost to my project or my life's calling to come serve in this other space.
And these aren't semantics. This is a really delicate idea to navigate. And you should know in your heart when you're not navigating it delicately. You should know in your heart when you're going, and I've just set a standard where no one has access to me unless they're making 6 figures.
Totally.
And if that's the case, guys, something's got to shift.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a liberating kingdom concept. Is my work is valuable, and unless you're in the top 1%, you will not be able to afford me. Man, that can't be what the story that Jesus came to tell, while at the same time being able to recognize not this. I hate the idea of I got to pay my bills. We got to eat too. No, that's not what I'm saying. Recognizing that I have to know how to carefully and with wisdom kind of organize the 24 hours that I have to give of myself.
And
So-
it's different for everybody. But I hope that what people are picking up on is if you are in the apostolic prophetic leadership role, you have to navigate that better than everybody else.
Yeah.
You know, you're like setting a framework. And so you will probably work harder than everybody else, and you'll probably not get what you're worth more than anybody else.
You should. If you're
Um,
not,
Unseen.
something's reversed.
Yeah.
If your view of apostolic leadership is I'm at the top delegating all of the workers, as our friend Neil Cole would say, you have flipped the pyramid.
Yeah.
Like that is how Babylon describes leadership.
Not
So
with
this
you.
is how I ended, and I'm not ending the episode here, but I will kind of start landing the plane with this. This is what we're gonna write another book eventually, John, you and Hugh and I, called Do the Work. And this is kind of the thesis of the book, and I end it with this. But we are looking for those who don't need to be told what to do, rather to simply be released and encouraged along the way, given certain terms and tools to help illuminate the city that can be built within their city. It doesn't require extreme skill, but it does require both calling and excitement to work your ass off. So what you said, the fact that we ever think we carry the yoke or the burden of, I got to convince them to work, I got to persuade. No, we're looking for those who need no convincing.
Bad game to play. That's right.
In fact, I would almost say, what if that was Jesus's premier criteria? That I'm going after these guys. Like I've watched Matthew now for 11 years. I've watched Peter and James for the past 6 years. They don't know I'm watching them, but I'm watching them. And these dudes can work. That's who I'm looking for. Come and follow me, because I need workers right now.
And their earthly reward, like they all die.
Really, the
You
call to
know?
follow is literally leave your transactional environment and come
Yeah,
to this
drop your net.
really weird
You're
spot where I'm gonna
only-
tell you not to even
yeah.
take your
Yeah.
backpack anymore. Like,
But I've seen how hard
Great.
you've worked.
I wanted to add one thing. I know we're kind of coming to the close here, but like it stood out to me. So you contrasted like golf or tennis and basketball in a way that, and so what I jotted down was like, kingdom ecosystems are a team sport. So like, it really stood out to me. This isn't something you can do as an individual, but then also we function as individuals. And even as you guys said, like sometimes in the hard moments, I get frustrated with others aren't working and others aren't. And I have this, I don't know if I've ever shared this with you guys. Maybe I've shared it 20 times because my memory sucks. But like, back in the day when I was building this like club on campus when I was in college, we had some people involved, and I was like, hey, it was like the new year. And I was like, hey, we called it like new student outreach or whatever. We're going to meet a bunch of new students for the first week of classes. And so I'm going to bring out a stereo system and table, and we're going to set up in the courtyard out here where everyone's hanging out. Got some flyers, and we're going to just start meeting people, telling them our club exists, telling them when we have get-togethers or whatever. And I showed up that day, and I told some other people. It was a small club, but I told some people that were involved, like, this is what time I'll be there. I'm going to bring the table. I got all the stuff for it. Let's just show up and work with me. And I got there, and I'll never forget, like, I was out there and it's time to set up, and I was like, God, no one came. Like there's plenty of people in the courtyard. It's new students. They had to be there. It's school, but literally no one came. And I was waiting for help because I was like, that sound system's really heavy in the truck. I got to like bring it in. And so I had this moment where I was like genuinely tempted to hop back in the truck. Like, no one cares. No one's here. Like, what's the point? And I had this like real moment that I think forever shaped me, forever, where it was like this conversation with myself or this question from God. But it was like, you've never needed to restock the team more. Like, what do you do when no one shows up? Like, this is actually the moment where your work matters more than it has ever mattered. Actually, if 10 people showed up, you could kick it. You could just be like, I came with the flyers, y'all get after it. But when no one shows up, and I remember having this like moment, it was like a conversion moment where I was like, oh, I won't say joyfully, I'll say defiantly, ran to the truck, threw that sound system over my shoulder, carried everything back, set the table up. And dude, I did outreach that day like I've never done in my life. I talked to every single, I like went up and interrupted in the lunchroom. I went and sat down with like tables full of people. Like, excuse me, guys, I just need to talk to you for a few minutes. Like obnoxiously told everybody on campus because of this thing that clicked in my head where I was like genuinely about to drive home. And anyway, so it's like there's a team sport, but there's an individual calling and responsibility that I think we have to like hold between us and God, frankly. Like, sure, it's a team sport and it's best played with others and it's most fun in community and relationships are formed there. But some of us
Sometimes you're all alone.
And it's hard that way. It's hard to be isolated and alone, but like the show goes on, the calling is still real.
Well, actually, it's funny you said those two words because my buddy Adam, who some of you remember from last season, was on an episode, but he always says isolation is part of the curse. Loneliness is not. So we will feel lonely often, but we're never isolated. We always have, as he would say it, we always have a cloud of witnesses around us that have carried this same mantle and heralded this same song for millennia. We also have people all over the world. And I feel this with you guys.
I mean, this is part of why we even said we wanted to do this podcast, because we know folks are out there to go, guys, you ain't alone.
Yeah. You're not isolated. You might feel lonely, but you're not isolated. We're with you. Essentially, you're not alone.
And at the end of the day, I think we all know there's this call that we will stand before him and he will say, what did you do with what I gave you? And we all have to answer that. Mm-hmm. So even the call that individually that we have, it's like we are working for purpose, like we want something to happen, but at the end of the day, it's like we will be old. I love sitting with my grandmothers because I love them, but mostly because they're so old. And I love thinking like they're so near to death that their perspective is just like they're thinking upon their life of, their days of work. And my grandmother was like wiping off the counter and she's lived in this house for 50 years. And I said, how many times have you wiped off that counter? And she just kind of smiled. And I just knew like all of the purposeless things that seem so menial, like they mean something because you did it with this heart of like, I care about my family and this work is a joy. And one day I will have to give an account for what I did with it. And also like, how did I bless and encourage people along the way?
Jesus replied, no one who puts his hand to the plow and looks back is fit for the service in the kingdom of God. So maybe a final, I think there's even a passage that talks about Christ's return, that he should find us with a hand on the plow. Find that someday. Remind me. But I feel like that, I mean, I grew up with that sense, like when he comes back, like we want him to find us working. We don't want to find or him to find us just chilling, playing a video game. So with that, we will leave this great conversation. Hopefully some encouragement there. We might start noticing, or you might start noticing this, but we should mention it. We're beginning here. This is October 2024. We're beginning a 1.5-day Brave City on-site immersions, where if you guys need some encouragement, find some people that are practitioners. There's usually a 1.5 days every month that we're having people find us around the country. Right now we're in Alton the next 3 months, but someday we'll put that on our website, won't we, John?
We'll
where
get it
they
up
can
there.
find information, but we'll start working on that now. So
There really are a couple, more than a couple. There are leaders, apostolic leaders, missional leaders, thinkers, whatever. There are some of you out there that do feel alone, probably every week. And we think that we need to kind of start convening
Yeah.
the real workers
Yep.
as much as we can, at least within this stream. So we're gonna try to do it. We're gonna try to create some kind of rhythm around it, and we'd love for you to be a part of that. There will be a cost, but what, if this is something that you really need, reach out to us and we'll work with you on that. But yeah, this is a good one, man. Do the work.